Welcome back, everybody. Today's video we're going to be talking about solving quadratic equations with formulas. Looking at this first one, we're solving for e. Let's rewrite it first. T equals e squared over 9. Looks more like a fraction this way. We look at a couple things happening to e. It's being squared. It's also being multiplied by 9, divided by 9. We'll do the opposite of divide by 9. We'll multiply by 9. And then we have 9t equals e squared. And the way we undo a square is we take the square root of both sides. But when you take the square root, just keep in mind you always have the positive or negative possibility. The square root of 9 we can take, which is 3. We'll put that outside the radical, but t is going to stay inside the radical. So two answers for this. E is equal to plus or minus the square root, plus or minus 3 square root of t. Let's look at another one similar to that. Formula gives the maximum height y of a projectile launched straight up, given acceleration a and initial velocity v. Solve for v. Once again, let me rewrite this. Y equals v squared divided by 2a. V is being squared. It's also being divided by 2a. We're going to do the opposite of divide by 2a. We're going to multiply by 2a. V squared then equals 2ay. We'll then take the square root of both sides. Don't forget that you always need the positive or negative. You can't take the square root of 2, can't take the square root of a, and you cannot take the square root of y. We'll just leave it inside the radical. V is now by itself. Two answers, positive and negative, square root 2ay. Now let's try a different one. It's going to get a little more complicated in the simplification. Here we're just solving for f. D equals 16ef squared. Let's rewrite this first. Look at all the things happening to f. It's being squared, multiplied by 16, multiplied by e. First thing we're going to do is divide both sides by 16e. Get the f squared by itself. So f squared equals d divided by 16e. We'll take the square root of both sides. It gives us f by itself. Don't forget the positive or negative. But when simplifying square roots of fractions, take the square root of the numerator and the square root of the denominator. In the denominator, we can take the square root of 16, but not e. We'll leave e inside the radical. Still have plus minus square root of d, but now it's 4 square root of e. Alright, I'm going to rewrite this up here so we have a little more room to work. I'll just write f first, plus or minus square root of d in the numerator, 4 square root of e in the denominator. Now what I'm going to do is called rationalizing the denominator. Basically it's multiplying by the number 1. But I'm going to rewrite 1 as this, square root of e over square root of e. Notice that's the radical in the denominator of our problem. And what this does is it will eliminate square root in the denominator, which we're not allowed to have. We want to write our answers simplified by not having a radical sign in the denominator. In the denominator we have that 4. Square root of e times square root of e is e squared, but the square root of e squared just is e. The numerator, we can multiply the d and e together to say square root of de. Final answer, plus or minus square root of de all over 4e. Another similar type situation here, another physics formula. The formula represents the kinetic energy K of an object with mass m and velocity v. Solve for v. We'll rewrite this a little bit here. Instead of saying 1/2, let's put mv squared divided by 2. We start undoing the things around v. V is being squared, multiplied by m, divided by 2. First thing, divide both, or multiply both sides by 2. Now we have mv squared equals 2k. Get rid of that m by dividing both sides by it. V squared is now equal to 2k divided by m. We can now take the square root of both sides. And then we need to rewrite it to save a little space up here. V is now by itself. We'll write v first. We have plus or minus. Fraction, anytime you have a fraction, put numerator 2k and the denominator m. Once again, we're going to multiply by 1. Multiplying anything by 1 does not change the value of the function. However, given the versatility of we have to write 1 as anything over itself, we're going to choose square root of m. Notice that's the denominator of our problem, and this will eliminate the radical sign in the denominator. V equals, the denominator is just going to be m, and the numerator is going to be square root of 2km. And that's our answer. We could figure out the velocity given the kinetic energy of the mass. One more, and this is involving the quadratic formula. We're solving for t, and notice the structure of this is a little different. D equals negative 16t squared plus 12t. We have a t squared term and a t term. Well, what we'll do first is subtract d from both sides. And what that will do is get everything to one side so we can then apply the quadratic formula. So we have negative 16t squared plus 12t minus d. Alright, if you remember our quadratic formula, write it up here. In this case, t, not instead of x. The formula is negative b plus minus square root symbol. Inside the square root symbol is b squared. Subtract 4ac, and the denominator is just 2a. Well, we need to figure out what our a, b, and c are in this problem. A is negative 16, b is positive 12, c is negative d. So now it's going to be a matter of fitting this all together in the quadratic formula. Negative b would be negative 12, plus or minus b squared, 12 squared, that gives us 144, minus 4 times the a number, which is negative 16, and times the c number. Oh, I forgot c in the formula. Yeah, I got a negative d. And let's extend this out so we see everything. Forgot the c up here. There we go. 2 times a would be 2 times negative 16. That's our denominator. Now we've got to do the simplification of everything we see here. Numerator. We have negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 144. And 4 times 16 is 64, 64d. Now we just got to determine, is it a positive or negative? Think of this as we have negative 4, negative 16, negative d. A negative times a negative times a negative is still a negative. That's why it's negative right there. 2 times negative 16 is a negative 32. Alright, the next part of this is we can simplify what's in the radical by factoring out a greatest common factor of 144 and 64. Well, it turns out 16 can divide into both of those evenly. 16 times 9 is 144. 16 times 4 is 64. So we got 9 minus 4d. Coincidentally, 9 and 4 are perfect squares, but they're a package deal. We need to keep those together since they're inside of parentheses. We can take the square root of 16, however. Alright, let's see if I can fit another step down here. We'll take the square root of 16 to get 4, negative 12 plus or minus 4 square root of 9 minus 4d. All over negative 32. Alright, what I'm going to do is, in fact, take out a negative from the top and bottom. So I have a negative 12 here, negative 32. Taking out a negative 1, I technically can factor it out. On the right side of the numerator, the plus minus, it doesn't matter whether 4 would be positive or negative, we account for it here. So we can now think of this as positive 12 and positive 32, making our simplification just a little bit easier. Alright, next up, t is equal to a 12, 4, and a 32. We can factor out a 4 from the top and the bottom. The 4, we're going to have a 3. 4 times 3 makes the 12. We factored out the 4 in front of the radical. The radical still is 9 minus 4d. The denominator I'm going to write as 4 times 8. And now notice the 4's are going to cancel out here. We have a 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom. Simplified answer, 3 plus or minus square root 9 minus 4d. There's some debate over how simplified this is. If you wanted to, you could break this into two fractions. 3 over 8 plus or minus square root 9 minus 4d all over 8. So it really depends on how you want to answer it. This is like a single term here, and this is like two different terms. I have a binomial situation. Alright, this has been solving quadratics with formulas. Hope it helped. Thank you for watching.